Okay, we have our scripts written. Now, do they do what we want? Of course, we wouldn't make mistakes, would we? Unless you're doing something obviously trivially simple, like just, a print statement or something like that. Your script is probably going to have to undergo some analysis of whether it's doing the right thing or not. And so you get into this realm of a repeated cycle of testing and debugging. And since everyone has to do it, let's just get into it for now and talk about it. So the first thing you do after you complete your script is you execute your script. And then you see whether it executes without any error messages or not. That's the first big test. Does it actually run without generating errors? If it does, you're not out of the woods yet, because there is still this thing about, did it do what we wanted it to do? Did it generate the correct plot? Did it generate the correct records in the DSS file? Did it do what we wanted it to? So we have to, and sometimes that can be the most difficult part of the process, is determining that sometimes, depending on what the script is about. So if it completed without an error message and the expected output is what you want, congratulations, you are done with this script. You have completed it successfully. However, things don't always go that way. So if it did not complete without an error message, or it did, but it didn't do the right thing, it didn't generate the expected output or perform the expected operations correctly, oh no, it's time to debug. Well, that's just how it is. And so let's get into how we do that. But before we talk about debugging first, let's talk about error messages. So error messages pop up when saving or running a script. So when you can get error messages just when you're saving the script. If it doesn't compile correctly, you'll get an error message, and so you can go fix it without even having to go test the script. But a lot of times it compiles fine, and then when you run the script via save and test, now you've got error messages. So they pop up when you're running the script. And you see here a little error message. You can say copy to clipboard if you want to keep it. But most normally, I don't do that. I say OK. And then if I need what that actual script was, I go to the log file, because they are also written to the log. You'll go advanced console output console, and then scroll down to the bottom of the console log, and there you'll find your error messages. One nice thing about the error messages is they do come with line numbers. And the line numbers do correspond to the line numbers in your script, in the script editor. So if you can read this particular error message, it says we have an error at line 75. It tells us what function we're in line 75. And the way you read these, if they have multiple lines, the latest one, the lowest or the last one, is where the error actually occurred. And so we see line 75 and we said, oh, dataset nam is not defined. Oh, well, if we come over here, we made a typo. We should have said dataset name. And so we had an easy one to track down. But anyway, that is about error messages. They will pop up. You can copy them to the clipboard, or you can just go to the console log and scroll to the bottom, and they will be there as well. Okay, so let's get into the types of debugging. There's 3 types we want to talk about, and they're all useful. This is probably for scripting. This is probably the most frequently used. Call it postmortem debugging. And also you can say debugging by print statement. So we use the print statement in Python. In Jython still has a print statement. You can also use the print function, which is preferable. It's also compatible with Python 3. Anyway, you use print and you output information to the console log. And then you run your script and you review the output in the console log that you had written out. And you can say, hey, it's working at this line. Hey, it's working at this point. Hey, I got to this point okay. And so by doing that, you can kind of trace through, perhaps, maybe it's not just you need to output the value of some variables at different places in the script so you can test when something went bad. So this is very common. And a lot of times, even when more sophisticated forms of debugging are available to you, this is still very useful because you can look at a lot of information at one time using this postmortem method. You can also output to a file if you need an output to a file. And since we're scripting HEC-DSSVue, you can imagine, well, let me output what this time series looks like at this point. And so let me save it to the DSS file under a particular name so I can track it through the execution of the script, what the changes were to the time series, let's say. You can also output the text files, and you can go review those after the execution. But the big idea here is you output information, you run the script, outputting this information, and the script either runs to completion or it blows up somewhere along the way. Either way, you can go review the information that you output to help determine where the problem is. And so you see up here on the top right, is just a little example, print, outputting to console log. And so all the print statements and print functions in a script go to the console log, and so you can review them there. Okay, postmortem debugging, probably the widest used for scripting. A lot of times used for even more sophisticated programming as well, although we'll talk about something else in a minute. Okay, in addition to postmortem debugging, we have runtime debugging. And this is really the same idea, except instead of just throwing stuff out to the console or to a file to look at later, you actually interrupt the execution of the script at certain points and say, hey, here's some information. And you use that information to determine what's going on. It's the same idea, except you see it not after the script runs, but you see it right when you output it. So if you say, message box.show information and put some message out there, that pops up whenever that line executes, and the script does not continue until you say OK. So you can put those at various places in your script to help determine what's going on. Okay, postmortem debugging, runtime debugging. The last type of debugging is the most sophisticated, and it's source level debugging. And that requires an integrated development environment, an IDE, like IntelliJ IDEA. We used to use Eclipse, although I think you still probably can set up Eclipse to do it as well. But the idea behind source level debugging is you can actually trace the execution line by line through your script. You don't have to execute it just line by line. You can set breakpoints at specific locations and run, and the script will run until it reaches that breakpoint. Then it will pause, and you can then review and inspect the values of variables and the state of the script at that point. And then if you need to, you can step through simply line by line to see what's happening and inspect the variables at each step. I used to have a setup for doing this via Eclipse, but it used some really old versions of Eclipse. It used some really old plugins for Eclipse, and it really became untenable. However, we have ChatGPT now, right? So I asked ChatGPT how to do source level debugging with on Python scripts with IntelliJ IDEA, because we have that. The community version is available on the app portal. And ChatGPT said, hey, here's how you do it. And I followed its directions and I set it up. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I do remember exactly that I asked ChatGPT and then I followed its instructions. And lo and behold, I was able to get IntelliJ to allow me to do source level debugging on a Python script. And here you can see a picture of that, and it's the script is you can see it's on that same line where I had dataset nam instead of dataset name. But you can see that it's got the current line, but down below it's got the values of all the variables that I'm interested in, and so you can really get into what's going on in your script in a sophisticated way with this type of debugging. Now, this might be beyond what most of you need to debug a script, but it is out there, and these tools are available from the app portal. IntelliJ is, and you can get, obviously ChatGPT to tell you how to use it, and it's there. So if Postmortem debugging doesn't quite do it for you, you need something a little more sophisticated, you can set up source level debugging. Okay, that's it for this session. In the next session, we'll start getting into actually scripting specific things within HEC-DSS and time series.